Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Solari Report. This is the second quarter 2020 wrap up, the best of the pandemic, a sane person's guidebook. And it's our big title, of course, is the injection fraud, because we look at this both from an economic point of view, and part of that is where are they trying to take the currency system, which leads us into the injection fraud. But as you know, our favorite person to talk to about all healthcare frauds, fake science, and related shenanigans is none other than the infamous John Rappoport, who has, I think, after decades and decades of reporting and trying to warn everybody about this, has literally in the last 6 months saved our bacon. And I've seen the many decades of work it took to be in a position to do that. So John has agreed to join me to discuss the best of the pandemic. And John Rappoport, thank you for joining me on the Solari Report. And most of all, thank you for saving our bacon on the pandemic.
Hi, Catherine. It's great to be here, as always. Looking forward to this. It'll be very interesting.
So before we dive in, let's talk a little bit about what we think of as the best of the pandemic. One of the things, there have been many great people and great sources that have done a marvelous job of bringing forward the facts on many different aspects of what's happened, because we're talking about a phenomena which is global and entails a radical reengineering of both political and economic systems. So it's a pretty complicated topic. It involves everything, but I've been struck at how many heroic, courageous people there are. And my focus is both on people who've done a marvelous job of bringing the facts forward and helped us understand what's going on, particularly unpacking the lies, but also I'm really focused on the people who basically took the official story and just turned it on its head. The word that keeps coming to my mind is like a hot knife through butter. And there's been some amazing, amazing contributions. So that's my notion of the best of the pandemic. The best information sources, but the information sources that really help us cut through the fog. What about you?
Yeah, I would say that's very good. I agree. There are people, I've made a list. I could have made it much longer. It kind of, once you start, it keeps expanding. And different people play different roles, so to speak. They attack it from different angles. Of course, my focus has always been on the fake science, so I tend to go in that direction. But yeah, upside down is a very vital phrase here, because it's one of these everything you know is wrong situations. So going to the root is very important. How far down the tree do you go to get at the lies and the delusions that are spreading everywhere? So I'm on board.
So I want to start early on. The lockdown in China started in November 2019, but not a lot of people knew about it. And things really got going at the beginning of 2020. But when the United States announced the lockdown and the real silliness, or the announcement that it had been officially made a pandemic, I guess was in March. That's when you and I did the series on the pandemic, and you did a couple of recordings that we published. And I think your writing and those recordings, as well as a whole series of interviews you came out very aggressive and very hard right at the beginning. And of course, everybody was scared because they didn't know, maybe this time it's real. Who knows? And I don't know what's going on. And, there was a little bit of a shell shock by people not knowing what to think and not having a lot of facts. But you had been through this so many times before, and you had seen the lies so many times before. You came out really aggressive and really hard, and it turned out in retrospect you were 100% right. And it was funny because I remember people telling me, "I don't know, John's being a little aggressive about this. You might want to be careful." That always happens. They get the shock benefit early on, but you were
Right.
fearless, and you were sure that this was, uh, literally very much like some of the other ones you'd covered. They just managed to take this one big and global. So, I have to start off by saying your performance was incredible. And I want to ask you how you were so sure that this was complete psyop.
Well,
How'd you know?
there were a couple things I would say that were immediate red flags. The first is, and I've encountered this a number of times, how do they discover the new virus that they're suddenly promoting? And as usual, nobody knows. It's just accepted. I mean, the process in the lab,
Right.
what are they really doing? Nobody ever videotapes it. Nobody films it. Nobody lays it out step by step and proves what they're doing is correct. So that leaves everything up in the air. And the suddenness with which they do this is another factor. They learned from their experience with AIDS and HIV, which was my first introduction to this insanity back in, let's say, 1986, when there were lots of arguments in journals about what the cause of AIDS was. And all manner of people were weighing in. And it was getting to be like the Wild West, which was not good for the establishment. They wanted to nail something, and they eventually
Right.
did in the May of 1984 in a press conference on television. Margaret Heckler, the Secretary of Health and Human Services, which at the time was Health and Welfare, I think, she just said, "Okay, we found the virus, that's it." And Robert Gallo said, "That's right." And that was the end of the research. And suddenly all the money, the research money, went there with HIV. And anybody who had been working on anything else as the cause was cut out of the equation very brusquely unless they changed their tune. And in my first book, AIDS Inc., I interviewed a doctor in New York who had been the editor of a journal, I think it was called AIDS Research. And he was publishing articles by a number of people who were presenting different viewpoints about what AIDS was and what the cause was. And suddenly he found himself without a job, and the journal was taken over, and the whole thing became HIV dogma. So I was prepared, you might say. And so when the announcement came out of China, it was like, whoa, 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 whoa,
Right.
whoa, whoa, whoa. Who is doing this? Who are the scientists and what are they doing? The burden of proof is on them. It's not on me. So let's see the proof. And there wasn't any.
Right.
That was convincing to me. So then I said, okay, the whole thing is now going to be
Right.
based on a story. Not the virus, but a story about a virus. So that was, you could say,
Right.
I mean, I could give you a few other key moments, but that was the trigger. And I said, okay, this is a rerun of everything that I've seen with West Nile, swine flu 2009, SARS 2003, Zika, the whole parade of frauds that came down the pipeline. That's why I was so sure.
So after we started recording the series with you, I dove in and went back and
Hmm.
read Virus Mania, and then did an interview with Tom Cowan, who also came out and was very brave, came out pretty early on. And same thing, where's the virus? So we did an interview on germ theory, but then I read all the books of Forrest Moretti about sort of how this virus game had worked. He's got a lot of information on the business game of the fraud. So DDT poisons people. You call it a disease. You say that it's caused by a virus. You create a vaccine. You stop using DDT. Then you say it's because the vaccine worked that the symptoms go away. And you save the insurance company a fortune. It's basically an insurance fraud. And I think the combination of all that showed you that there have been a lot of people who've been documenting all along this game. And there are many variations on it. I don't mean to oversimplify it. But but healthcare, fake science and science fraud has been a game for a long, long time, and it's intimately involved with protecting corporations and the insurance
Right.
industry.
Absolutely. It's the greatest cover story in the world. A
Right.
story about a virus. And
Well, it's hard to believe how bad it's gotten. Well, I mean, look at what's going on globally, but they really think they can, they can fake a
sure.
pandemic.
Well, I'll mention one of my heroes who passed away about a month ago, David Crowe, Crowe, and his website is theinfectiousmyth.com. David spent decades on the whole, well, he researched many things, very meticulous on the science, very specific, looking at other studies, taking them apart, criticizing them, and so forth, and was a prominent person waging a battle about the question of, did they ever discover HIV really? Is the virus real? And so when this whole thing
Right.
erupted, he began an article about the COVID-19 virus. And until very shortly before he passed away, he kept updating it, and you can find his critique at theinfectiousmyth.com, where he really looks at the question of what would constitute proof of having found a new virus. How does this effort fall short? What are the missteps and the delusions and the con games that are played, and so on and so forth? So I was very glad to see that he took up the sword this time as well, and wrote a couple of articles referring to his piece on the situation. So that was a key for me.
So one of the things that had most impacted me was the video of the meeting in Switzerland of the vaccine program
Mm-hmm.
heads from all over the world. And if you take, I'll define the sort of Vaxxed 1 and Vaxxed 2 group of the folks at Children's Health Defense, and then Andrew Wakefield and Polly Tommy and Del Bigtree. We had Vax 2 published last year, which I think is just an amazing documentary. But then the video happened. Did you watch that video, John?
No, I don't think I've seen it. I may have seen clips from it, but not the whole thing.
Okay, so Dale Bigtree gathered the clips, and it's really the clips that he gathered that you need to see. But essentially what came out was that there was significant global pushback against what they wanted to achieve with the global vaccination program. Essentially what they want is they want a global mandate. And the pushback was significant, and what the analysis said is that the practitioners and the parents want proof that individual vaccines are safe and effective, and that the combination...
Okay, now I know what you're talking about. Yeah, I've seen this. Yes, you bet.
Right. The combination together is safe and effective, and we don't have any science to prove that individually they're safe and effective, let alone put them all in a body together and they're safe and effective. And it was a magical moment because it had taken the
Hello.
death and the disability of many, many people to get to the point where the parents, the doctors, and the program heads were willing to face how frightening what was happening was. And when you, at least when I watched those clips and had it, sort of underscored and explained by various people, what you realize was, as of January 1st, the push for vaccines globally was dead in the water.
Right.
And to me, it's much easier to understand COVID-19 if you understand that the push for a global mandate for vaccines was dead in the water, and
Absolutely.
they needed some
Yep.
kind of radical action.
That's another key. That's another fantastic key.
Right.
I agree. They've done this before.